dissolving beneath the light until it gradually dissolved into his whole body. At that point, he turned to his subordinates and informed them that they are heading to the next trial. Furthermore, as Kang and his minions ascended the stairs into the cave, they were followed by the cave's inhabitants. Rin turned his head to look at Hwang-no and noted that he had been carried the entire time. However, at that very moment, after their clan chief had transferred him energy, he was now walking with his own strength, and he displays no signs of exhaustion despite the fact that they have been traveling for a considerable amount of time. She gives a sigh before turning to gaze at the leader of their clan, at which point she has a sudden recollection of a youngster who was joyfully running, but she quickly pushes the image out of her mind since she has already made up her mind not to give that boy any more reasons to have false hope. They have already arrived at the chamber where their third trial will take place after having to trek for quite some distance. When Rin and Sima first saw the location, they were perplexed since it appeared to be empty. When Marluk glanced around, he said that the setting was weird because there was nothing there. Marluk commented that the place was empty but it felt strange. Marluk, there doesn't seem to be anything here just as you said, uttered Kang. But Sima had seen something in the area, and he was going to keep it to himself until their clan leader turned to him and asked him whether it was a formation. He was nervous because he didn't know how much their clan head knew about him and Rin, and that made him sweat because at first, Xinyun asked Dang about deadly insects, and now he was asking him about the formation. Nevertheless, he reacted by stating that Xinyun was correct and that the location was protected by Man Sang-ya's structure. Even yet, they run the risk of putting themselves in harm's way if they divulge their names. This is due to the fact that Xinyun was a transcendent specialist who had dedicated subordinates who possess powers that cannot be ignored. But as of right now, the most effective strategy would be for them to carry out the directives of their clan head and figure out how to break the formation as quickly as they can so that they can escape. Afterwards, he added that it appears to be a formation that depicts a disguised landscape by the arrangement of natural elements. Specifically, he said that it looks like a camouflaged forest. When Xinyun asked him whether he could find a solution to it, he didn't waste any time before responding that he would give it a shot. And as a result of that, Rin's jaw fell because she was shocked and she had no idea that Sima was able to deconstruct Man Sang-jan's formation. Furthermore, after Sima has finished his inspection of the area, he will crouch down, collect the stone, and then stand back up. He was under the impression that it was a structure that incorporates natural elements, so he flipped the rock, moved the orchid, and planted it in that location. He abruptly jumped when a stalactite appeared and he thought it needed to be encased in soil. On the other hand, Kang was observing Sima when he referred to him as Heavenly Brain. However, this was not the case, as Kang had to first observe the abilities of the present Heavenly Fool of the Xiu clan. The most naive individual in both the heavens and the earth, the Heavenly Fool was how Xiu was referred to by his tribe in the past. The Xiu clan, which had previously produced generations of people who excelled in formations and tactics, failed to pass on any talent to him when he was born. However, he not only lacked talent, but he also lacked motivation to succeed. Xiu had turned his back on his studies and training and instead spent the entire day lounging around. Although he was the second son of Xiu Sung, the clan chief and member of the Xiu clan, which had taken over the military strategy department of the Muram Union, he was simply assigned to the Flying Hawk squad rather than the post within the Union. This was despite the fact that Xiu Sung had been the one who had taken over the department. To tell the truth, Xiu's performance up until this point was really a sham. After seeing his parents turn distant toward him after he had exhibited his skill, Xiu Sung began living a life in which he hid his talent. This is evidenced by the fact that Xiu was a child that Xiu Sung had accidentally with a prostitute. On the day that the sect wiped off his clan, he was the only member of his family to survive. And from that day onward, he began to conceal his true identity. In addition, he became renowned as the Heavenly Brain due to his remarkable performance over a number of conflicts, despite the fact that he eventually met his end. Xiu's good strategies and formation led to him becoming the head strategist of the faction that opposed the Blood Cult. Kang had never entertained the idea that Xiu would voluntarily join his clan. Furthermore, the leader of their clan was informed by Sima that the configuration in question was a 1,000-road diluting shadow formation that was utilized in the conflict with the Mount Huang sect, and that it appears to be a modified version of that. When the chief of their tribe asks him whether he knows how to solve it, he immediately says yes and points his finger in the direction of the large boulder, explaining that it was one of the key objects that composes the structure. In the event that the boulder were to be destroyed, the formation as a whole would fall apart. Even though Sima Gun was unaware, he was overjoyed when Xinyun put his hand on his shoulder and complimented him on how great his work was because Sima Gun's work had impressed the leader. On the other hand, Kang moves towards the boulder and punches it with his immense force. As a consequence, the boulder was crushed into bits, and then the stalactite appeared in the ceiling of the location. After that, they found the door leading outside. Warlock remarked that Sima Gun's performance was quite remarkable, but Sima Gun couldn't help but scratch his head and said that it turned out that he was simply lucky. Sima Gun, however, observes something as they get closer to the entrance, and it appears like Man Sangya has written something on the door. The sentence reads that only one person who is prepared to risk dying to protect their friends may attend the last trial. Sima Gun was taken aback when Ah-Rin announced that she would go, and he was about to argue with her when Ah-Rin abruptly cut him off. She explained her decision by saying that she was the only one who hadn't been able to offer any assistance since they had entered the cave. She was resolute, and competing would be the sensible option for her to do at this point. But Kang confronted her and argued against her desire to participate in the subsequent trial. He reasoned that he had brought all of them to the cave so that they could gain experience. He was on the verge of cursing Ah-Rin, but he restrained himself because it was not the appropriate time. Instead, he confronts her with the question of what nonsense she is talking about, and Kang says that he would be the one who would go. Ah-Rin was stunned, but Ah-Rin continued to push, and just as she was ready to say anything, Kang asked them who among them is stronger than he is. When no one answered, Kang informed them that he would enter the door. However, just as he was getting ready to go, Ah-Rin called him and handed him the ox hair stinger case. There are needles inside that have been coated with the best quality paralysis poison, and he can use it as a hidden weapon or utilize the poison to minimize the amount of pain he feels in the event that he suffers a significant injury. Kang, on the other hand, took a look at the ox hair stinger case and came to the conclusion that it was the clan's top secret, hidden weapon. He believed that it should only be given to members of the clan when they were in a situation in which their lives were in danger. If word got out that the item existed, Ah-Rin's bloodline would be severely punished. Despite this, she still gave it to him. He quickly took the object and stowed it away beneath his clothing. He assured Ah-Rin that he would put it to productive use and then give it back to her. When he was about to go, Kang turned to his subordinates and told them that they have no reason to be concerned because everything will be resolved in a short amount of time. After that, he went ahead and opened the door to the subsequent trial. He perceived something on his front, something that looked like a snake but had feathers. And when the monster rose to its feet and let out a force, Kang suddenly beamed a smile and expressed his appreciation for the food that was on his front. The status panel appeared and revealed that the creature in front of Kang was a flying salamander that radiates a strong wrath against the invader. The flying salamander is also known as a serpentine monster due to the fact that the creature was half salamander and half serpentine in its appearance. In addition to this, the salamander started to get angry and approached Kang. But the latter, who was unafraid of the creature, explained that from the very beginning, he takes everything seriously, and that he does not have the luxury of doing things easily. Afterwards, Kang suddenly dissipated the force he had been holding in his hand and called forth his several skeleton warriors. And because he left his subordinates outdoors, it was perfectly acceptable for him to cultivate his skeleton warrior, and nobody will be the wiser about the fact that he owns them. In addition to this, the salamander was exerting force, and its eyes were glowing brightly as it moved closer to the skeleton warriors who were firmly gripping their swords and rushing towards the creature. The salamander uses its jaws to seize one of the skeletons, while its tail attacks the other two skeletons. After that, the salamander came to an abrupt halt, and it appeared that it seemed to be observing its opponent. However, a few skeleton warriors quickly struck the salamander using force on their palm while other skeletons abruptly struck their sword and hit every portion of the salamander's body. The skeleton was tossed when the salamander struck its wings, which caused the skeleton to be flung. Furthermore, the peak swordsman suddenly advanced toward the salamander and strike its sword at the opponent. Then, a massive force that forms a light is released, which causes one leg of the salamander to be cut. This causes the creature to become enraged, and it suddenly flies upward, dropping the skeleton that was in its mouth and being watched by a large number of skeleton warriors, including the peak swordsmen, who were still holding its swords and still shining with force. On the other hand, the salamander was furious and waving its wings, and as a consequence, the salamander was releasing a large quantity of its stored energy. Kang, accompanied by his skeleton soldiers, was looking skyward at the salamander and commented that the salamander was emitting a significant quantity of inner Kai. However, Kang was astounded when the salamander suddenly unleashed its immense might on them. This is why he yelled for his skeleton warriors to spread out throughout the battlefield. Some of the skeletons are able to avoid being hit by the huge force, but others are not. As a result of this, Kang made a decision to call forth an ally who possessed the capacity to fly as well. After that, he placed his hand on the ground and used his skill Revive, and the two gradually emerged in the light on the ground. He summoned two of his newly obtained subordinates, Kwak Ju-san, who has the skill of a vampire lord, and Gong Sun-chu, who is a basilisk. Now, round 2 begins, he added. On the other hand, it was stated in the status window that his revive skill was the most powerful strength given to necromancers, and that it was his ability to revive and control the monster he had killed. Additionally, it stated that it would revive the dead monster to its form when it was alive, and that the revived monster would retain the abilities and skills it had before it died. Kang believed that he would never have a need to utilize the revive skill, but since Kwak Ju-san and Gong Sun-chu were deemed to be monsters, he waited until the skill could be used before attempting to use it. In addition to this, Kang observed that there's something strange at Kwak and Chu. After then, the status window pops up and it says that he has found a new effective revive, and that the vampire lord and the basilisk as a veteran creature have been called forth. He was the first player to summon a veteran entity in the game. In addition, as a reward for making the discovery, he was given a significant quantity of experience, and his overall level was raised. On the other hand, the veteran entity is a one-of-a-kind creature that was produced when tainted mana and the kai of a monster that had been sacrificed were combined. It has better statistics than the average entity, and it can learn a new ability whenever it gains a level, and once it reaches the maximum level for its class, but whether or not it can learn further skills is still up for question. Kang had a grin on his face and was still thinking that he could exceed the monster's limit when the peak swordsman clacked its mouth for his attention and pointing its finger upward since the salamander was already approaching them. As a result, Kang swiftly directed Kwak and Chu to proceed to their task, and he continued to think that he could overcome the monster's limit. And as a consequence of this, Kwak gradually disappeared while Chu was making use of his demonic eyes of petrification. The salamander, whose eyes were gleaming and who was releasing force while waiting for the opponents, the basilisk eye glowed, and he made a hasty leap and released an aura. The salamander was shocked and abruptly smacked its own tail. After that, Kwak appeared and spread his blood in the air, and he lifted his hand and formed a blade veil. Afterward, he struck down, and then those blade veils rushed toward the salamander. The body of the salamander was punctured multiple times by the blade veils of Kwak Ju-san, which ultimately led to it collapsing to the ground. After that, the basilisk moved closer to the salamander and used his demonic eye petrification ability to attack the salamander. In addition, the basilisk bared its razor-sharp teeth and bit the salamander. The salamander, whose body was being penetrated by the sharp teeth, was in excruciating pain and seemed at a loss for what to do other than grumble. After that, a number of skeletons, including the most skilled swordsmen, approached the salamander and thrust their swords into it. All the while the basilisk continued to bite the salamander until a green liquid began to emanate from its body, when all of a sudden, the salamander's eyes were enlarged and was spewing fire all over its body, and as a consequence, all of the skeleton warriors, including the basilisk, were surprised, and they abruptly ran away from the salamander, who had swiftly risen up and seemed to regain its vigor as it released fire. However, before the salamander could strike them, Kang abruptly pierced the salamander's head with his sword, which caused the creature to tumble back down onto the ground. Kang pressed so hard on the sword that it entered the entire head of the salamander and pierced on the ground. As a result, the sword released a large amount of force and formed a light as it scattered across the area. This occurred because Kang had pressed so hard on the sword till it had penetrated the entire head of the salamander. After that, he used his Heavenly Thunder compression attack because he had to take care of the salamander before it got burned, because the corpse of a monster is a material that is comparable to riches for a blacksmith. The status window appeared and informed Kang that the monster known as the Flying Salamander had been defeated, and that as a reward, he will be given the inner core. His level is now 51, and the rank he has achieved in necromancy is S. In addition to this, he advances his proficiency in all of the skills associated with necromancy. A number of new abilities, such as Guillotine Bones, Curse of Berserker, Extortion, and Monster Exorcist, have been acquired by him, and all of his statistics have been permanently raised. The Scythe of Melting Poison has amassed a tremendous amount of natural force, and the total quantity of power that it is capable of absorbing has reached its limit. As a result, the Scythe of Melting Poison has advanced to rank S. On the other hand, Kang was holding his scythe, and it appears that it has undergone some changes as a result of the large ingestion of poison. because if the flying salamander had gone all out from the very beginning, it would not have been an easy task. He contemplates whether or not it would be okay for him to eliminate monsters in order to achieve natural power. It was fortunate for him that the salamander misjudged him and the monsters that he had summoned, as this contributed to him winning the battle. Kang was about to dismember the salamander when he observed that it appeared to be already dead. This prompted him to suddenly kneel on the ground and attempt to revive it. In addition, Kang brought his palm up to the salamander's head and let off a burst of energy. After that, a figure that resembled a circle of light developed beneath the salamander, and it was successful because the salamander's eyes suddenly opened wide and began to glow, and its cut arm was already healed. It started growling angrily at Kang as it suddenly stood up. The status window materializes out of nowhere to inform Kang that the flame serpent monster has been brought back to life, and that it has been added to the roster of his summons. On the other hand, the salamander was suddenly moving closer to Kang, but when it got close, Kang put his hand on the salamander's head as if he was attempting to tame it, and as a direct result, the salamander quickly stopped attacking him. According to the information provided in the status window, the flying salamander has an attribute rating of S+. Its vitality is 400, its strength is 463, its agility is 481, and its sagacity is 461 respectively. As soon as he had the salamander under control, he made the decision to put an end to the situation before his subordinates discovered what had occurred and saw his skeleton warrior along with the salamander, Quack Ju-san and Basilisk. Then he slowly made his way out of the room. Furthermore, Kang went looking for the barrier based on the written report that the blood sect provided, which stated that it will be lifted and a door would appear after the monster is slaughtered. However, he has been unsuccessful in his search. While he was pondering about the location, he questioned whether it was because he had summoned additional summons or because he had made the salamander his familiar. In spite of the fact that it deviates so drastically from the natural progression of the initial history, it would appear that the location still harbors some secrets. He touched the wall, and an energy began to flow on the wall. He realized that the energy was natural power since it felt rather pleasant, and he was able to clearly feel the complete inner structure that was contained within the wall. However, he was perplexed because he was unable to locate it. Once more, he aimlessly strolled around the area, and after he located the barrier, he opened it. As he approaches the barrier, he wonders whether or not Mang Sang-ya's martial arts books or his body are within. However, when he finally reached the middle, he was taken aback to see that there was nothing there. He pondered the possibility that there was another concealed location beyond the barrier. But Kang's mouth dropped open and he was taken aback when someone spoke from behind him and told him that he didn't have to wander about like a rat hunting for food and that there wasn't a skeletal corpse on the site. As a direct result of this, Kang abruptly gripped his sword and turned to look for who had spoken to him. The elderly man, upon first seeing him, remarked that he couldn't possibly be from another world because he seemed to be exactly the same as them. Kang breaks out in a cold sweat and is startled by the fact that the elderly man appears to be aware that he was reincarnated. As a result, he inquires of the elderly man as to whether or not he was previously known as Man Sang-ya. In response, the elderly man stated that it was pointless for him to raise the question because he was already aware of the response. The elderly man appears to be disheartened because, when he read the energy within the heaven, he received a divination that told him that he would be trapped in a horrible predicament if he left his corpse at that spot, and that if he had done so, he would have been the servant of some young lad in his final years. On the other hand, Kang approaches the elderly man and feels he doesn't sense any hatred from the man, despite the fact that the elderly man appears to be pitying Kang as he approaches. Kang was told by Mang Samjan that he was not fond of his power that mocks the body of the dead, but he has no other choice but to give him his power that Kang needed to combat the larger evil. The old man then asked Kang whether he wanted it, but if he didn't want it. The elderly man couldn't continue his words after Kang unexpectedly held his hand. And as a direct consequence of it, the elderly man raised his hand and directed his energy against Kang. Afterwards, Man Sang-ya moved so that he was standing behind Kang and put his hand on the latter's shoulder. In addition, Man Sang-ya explained that he was a genius who might or might not show up once every 10,000 years, and that it is impossible for a common person who is not familiar with formations to comprehend all of his teachings. He said this because it is impossible for an ordinary person to reach the end of his teachings. Because of this, he will deliver each lesson in two parts. First, he will give Kang the power to annul all of the information in the world. Next, he will request Kang to deliver the hidden record that contains all of his teachings about traps and formations to someone who is comparable with his talent, which is Sima Gun. Nansangya continued by saying that he is capable of feeling regret for surrendering the fate of the planet to a foreigner who hails from another realm. However, because Kang protected his friends as he progressed through the trials, he hoped that he would also extend a helping hand to those innocent people as well. Afterward, Nansangya vanished, but Kang guaranteed that he would put an end to the blood sect. To his astonishment, though, he took a startled step back as an explosion occurred just in front of him. After that, the door opened, and his subordinates ran towards him while inquiring whether he was okay. However, Kang only smiled at them as they approached. There are 2 points of interest on top of Mount Tianmu that allow visitors to experience the majesty of nature. The first is a sizable body of water known as Heaven Lake, and the second is a single tree that is stunning in both its magnitude and its uniqueness. Then, all of a sudden, a light appeared at the lone tree, and it opened up as if it were some kind of a gateway. Kang, Rin, Marluk, Sima Gun, and Wang know they're all get out. Sima Gun instructed everyone to bury the box before they were discovered by those bandits. Once they had done that, they could grab a limb from the solitary tree and make their way back to the Beacon clan. Sima Gun called again to the attention of their clan leader who was looking at numerous graves on their front. They were all surprised because of those numerous graves. Xinyun told his subordinates that there's no need for them to bury the box. But Sima Gun suddenly laughed because he was confused about the logical decision of their clan leader. He asks Xinyun how would the Heavenly Favor Bank know whether or not they buried the box. Then he insists that they have to snap off a branch of the divine tree then leave. But Xinyun also insisted that they don't need to snap off a branch of the divine tree. Then Sima Gun asked him again on how they will prove to the Heavenly Favor Bank. But he can't continue his sentence because he was surprised when he saw numerous bandits come rushing towards them. When they looked again at the lone tree, the portal was already gone. On the other hand, Kang maintained his composure, and it appears that he had been anticipating the arrival of the bandits. Those pirates, on the other hand, couldn't believe that Xinyun and his men had scaled the pinnacle of the mountain when they hadn't seen them there the previous night. A man who was in charge of the bandits clenched his teeth and became furious as he watched what was happening. He yells at Xinyun and demands to know what other people are doing in their stead. Then, all of a sudden, he lifted his sword and gave directions to all of the bandits to get ready for battle. He also made sure that not a single one of them was able to get away. The subordinates of Xinyun get themselves ready for combat in the same way as the bandits do. Xinyun, on the other hand, appeared to be holding his position, and it seems he was waiting for someone to approach. He believed that every one of those bandits was at a rank higher than Zenith, with approximately 40 of them being at the Zenith Advanced rank. It is highly possible that the Transcendent Man there is the Vice hideout, and each of them is an extremely formidable expert. However, just as the bandits were about to assault them, someone yelled at them to back up and get out of the way. Kang took note of it, as well as the man's sudden and enormous roar like that of a lion, and he reasoned that the man must be the leader of the Tianmu hideout, Do Nam Gang, and that he was the king of the Gale Thunder Mountain. Xinyun's subordinates begin to sweat and appear afraid when they see Nam Gang, who was releasing energy towards them, and they can sense how vast it is. This is in contrast to their clan leader, who smiles when he sees the Mountain King. Xinyun wonders to himself whether Nam Gang is at the Ascended Beginner rank because he can see the remarkable Kai in him, and because he releases his own energy in the same manner as Nam Gang does. Furthermore, Nam Gang was taken aback by the fact that Xinyun's Kai was being deflected rather than crashing into his, and he found Xinyun to be an intriguing man. On the other hand, Rin furrowed her brow as she realized that the odds were stacked against them and that if they engaged those robbers, everyone would perish. She was debating whether or not she should come clean and admit that she was a member of the Miram Union. But she was hesitating and asking herself whether or not she should sell the name of the Miram Union in order to escape the mayhem. If she did so, she would have to spend the rest of her life carrying the stigma of dishonor on her shoulders. But the lives of Marluk, Wang No, and Liu Xinyun can't be more vital than her dignity. Her astonishment was justified when the leader of their clan revealed himself to be Liu Xinyun, the leader of the clan that serves Beacon's commission. In addition, Nam Gang did not care who Xinyun was, nor was he the least bit concerned about his name. Instead, he was attempting to bury a revolting box that Xinyun was carrying in his hands. After making it appear as though he was using his power to grab the box from Xinyun's palm with his finger, Nam Gang finally managed to get a hold of the box, while the other subordinates of Xinyun furrowed their brows in confusion. Rin thought that Namgang was Kai telekinesis, which is rumored to be a power that can only be employed by people who have achieved ascendance. On the other hand, Namgang informed Xinyun that his sin was having the audacity to encroach into their hallowed territory while being blinded by his avarice, and that he would pay for his actions with his lives. Xinyun broke into a quick smile and informed Namgang that it appeared as though he had misinterpreted something. Xinyun responded by stating that he was not there to fulfill the commission from the Heavenly Favor Bank and that he was only there to tell him something when Namgang asked him what it was. The latter furrowed his brow and didn't believe Xinyun and thought that what he said was just a lame joke because Xinyun couldn't overcome their crisis with his mere words. So Namgang commanded Xinyun to stop his useless words and draw their sword while he was playing the box that he took from Xinyun. On the other hand, Kang was forced to draw his sword from its sheath because he had no other option. Kang challenges Namgung if he survives 10 rounds and then asks him if he will listen to him a little bit more after each round. Then he draws his sword to fight Namgung. Then it seems I won't hear a single word, uttered Namgung. After taking his position, Namgung launches an unexpected assault on Xinyun. He moves very quickly, almost as if he were the wind itself. He was under the impression that Xinyun was an idiot, and that he would be able to kill him with a single blow. But then he used his divine fist of Gale Thunder. After that, a large number of punches were directed towards Xinyun. Xinyun parried the blow with his sword as Namgang threw a punch and unleashed a tremendous amount of force in his direction. As they assaulted and counterattacked one another, a gigantic light formed as a result of the conflict. The fact that Xinyun was already transcendent despite his young age and was able to escape Namgung's onslaught caused the latter to furrow his brow. On the other hand, those who were seeing the battle from the side couldn't believe that Xinyun was able to compete head-to-head with their formidable hideout leader. Even Marluk, along with Sima Gun and Rin, were taken aback by how powerful their clan leader was, who was able to maintain a face battling with the hideout leader. In addition, the vice leader of the hideout was concentrating very hard on the fight between their leader and Xinyun. He had the impression that their hideout leader was holding back some of his power because he knew that if he used all of his power, the tomb would be completely obliterated. In addition, there is an insurmountable chasm that exists between someone who has transcended and someone who has risen. However, he furrowed his brow and his jaw dropped because he was aware that Xinyun possessed abilities that were beyond his wildest imagination. Because their great hideout leader's inner Kai is about equivalent to that of 3 cycles, and Xinyun is able to block those consecutive punches without suffering any inside harm. On the other hand, Namgung unleashes a powerful kick at Xinyun and thinks that in order for Xinyun, who is barely over 20 years old, to have that much inner Kai, the latter would need at the very least around 2 cycles worth of inner Kai. But Kang was able to evade all of those sequential attacks from Namgung. Nevertheless, it was difficult for him to do so because Namgung was significantly stronger than he had anticipated. And that fight would have been very challenging for him to win had he not acquired the skills necessary to win while studying the Sage Medical Arts. Additionally, the status window revealed that his accumulated power reinforcement had reached the rank of S+. He briefly dramatically boosted the effectiveness of all potential energies that were contained within himself, and his current maximum duration is 15 minutes. His modification is 150%, and his present efficiency is at its maximum. Kang furrowed his brow and held tight his sword while releasing massive energy into his body. He thought about the half-cycle of inner Kai that he absorbed from various undead using Death Kai extraction and adding the half-cycle from the Kai of Thundercloud and the Kai of Eastern Shining Sage as well as the half-cycle worth of inner Kai from cold absorbed from the Heavenly Glacier water. And because it was a 1.5 times amplification of 1.5 cycles, then it should produce the effect of being slightly over 2 cycles worth. It has already been 3 minutes, and he can't be careless during the remaining 12 because he could be defeated in one strike. On the other hand, it appears that Namgung is fascinated with Xinyun and that he has captured his attention. The latter indicates to Xinyun with his palm that he should approach him and begin his attack while releasing a large amount of force on his body in the form of yellow light. And because Xinyun is able to escape all of Namgung's attacks, the latter chose to release a bit of his power. As a direct consequence of this, Xinyun furrowed his brow and clenched his teeth when he watched Namgung form his stance and enhance the power that he was producing on his fist. After then, Namgung threw a hard punch in the direction of Xinyun. In addition, Xinyun was aware of the heavy punch that Namgung was going to throw at him, so he made preparations to avoid it. However, the punch was so powerful that Xinyun was unable to escape it, and as a consequence, He was thrown. Xinyun's subordinates were shocked and shouted his name when they saw that he could not avoid the powerful attack of the hideout leader and fell on the loner tree. "Halt!" exclaimed Xinyun. The latter's subordinates were worried about him when they saw that he was in pain. Afterward, Namgung walked close to Xinyun, who was gradually stood up. Xinyun, on the other hand, bowed in respect to Namgung and said that he had endured roughly 50 rounds and asked the latter if he was allowed to say one thing. Namgung furrowed his brow when Xinyun told him that he has to surrender and plead to accept his subordinates, and he will bear the responsibilities for their sins as their leader. Namgung was amazed at Xinyun because even in this sort of situation, he was still taking care of his subordinates. "Very well," uttered Namgung. In addition, Xinyun has given the order for his subordinates to put down their weapons. However, his subordinates were mad and did not want to follow him. But as soon as Xinyun shouted at them, they immediately put down their weapon. On the other hand, Namguk called Diguk and gave him instructions to bring Xinyun's subordinates back to their hideout. Namgung gave an affirmative response when Diguk questioned whether or not he intended to stay in the location, telling Diguk that he was correct and that he intended to remain in the location. After that, Marluk, Simagun, Hwang-no, and Arin pursued those bandits and went to their hideout. But Arin furrowed her brow because she was powerless to do anything about their predicament while her allies were in such a state of bewilderment. Furthermore, now that all the bandits and Xinyun's subordinate left them, Xinyun and Namgung were alone and they can now talk properly. The latter commented that Xinyun had good subordinates, and the latter told Namgung that they are not just subordinates, they are good comrades. Xinyun said that Namgung won't need to be conscious of his surroundings because their comrades already left and they can begin their conversation at that moment. On the other hand, Namgung bursts out laughing because, in his mind, Xinyun is an idiot. He then asks Xinyun whether he truly believes that he would be able to take him on with all of his strength. He also asks Xinyun if he is aware that the box is absolutely empty, and that he was made to look like a fool by a simple merchant, and that they only intended to drive people to death and insult the world even after death. And then he throws the box on Xinyun. It is a celebration of viewing the person who will lead the subsequent generation that he tells the latter to get his subordinates on their hiding and leave the mountain, and he will look the other way about the incident. Afterward, Xinyun catches the box and closes it after saying that he cannot do what Namgung was instructed him to do, and as a result, Namgung becomes enraged and yells at Xinyun saying that he was foolish, and even though he already spoke so that Xinyun could understand, but it seems that he really wished to antagonize the bandits for a mere coins. Xinyun had to start talking quickly since Namgung was already producing such great energy. Namgung abruptly froze and became inquisitive when Xinyun began about how, 60 years ago, the eldest son of a prominent scholar family was able to pass the final test of the imperial examination. He had a woman to whom he had made a commitment to marry, but she was only a simple peasant. Unfortunately, the truth was revealed by his family, and as a result, she was subjected to a variety of threats and eventually had to flee. And after he was made aware of the facts, he cursed his family and then fled. In addition, he searched for her until his feet shed blood and pus, but he realized he was unable to find her and needed immense fortune in order to find her. From then on, he began making money as if he was possessed. He poured all of his money into searching for her but was unable to find even the slightest trace. Falling into despair, he began committing all sorts of eccentricities. He did so because his empty heart couldn't be filled no matter what he did. Only when he approached the age close to death did he finally figure out the truth, that when she was driven out she was pregnant with his child. And because she was unable to find a place to live, she roamed around the world and eventually gave birth to her child in the mountain hideout, then died. He immediately wanted to go to his wife's grave and see the child who was all grown up. He couldn't face his child while he was still alive. Therefore, he decided to see his wife and child after he died. Afterwards, as soon as Namgung heard Xinyun, he began trembling all over as though he himself was familiar with the story. He challenges the latter to provide evidence for what he has just stated. Xinyun responded with "of course." When Namgung questioned Xinyun what he would do if he couldn't prove it, he was astonished when Xinyun suddenly tossed his sword in front of him and said that if he couldn't prove it, Namgung has the opportunity to cut him down in an instant. When one of the bandits, a bald man, saw Marluk, Hwang-no, Simagun, and Arin sitting on the ground while being bound by a rope, he was taken aback and questioned his comrades what was going on when he witnessed the situation. He also said that when they got the call from the main hideout, He came sprinting over and asked if the peak had truly been penetrated by that few individuals. They were also questioning where their hideout leader was, but one of the bandits stated that the leader of their hideout was currently engaged in a secret meeting with a young man who is directing them. They were terrified because the mountain hideout that they had been hiding in was discovered by Xinyun and his allies, and because it was now certain that they would be executed. However, Namgang and Xinyun were carrying on their talk inside of the residence they were in. According to the Namgang, the majority of the people who live in the mountain hideout have either chosen to isolate themselves from the outside world for a variety of reasons or are keeping secrets that they cannot share with anybody. He was none of those because he was born and raised on the mountain from the very beginning. He abruptly paused because he hesitates to say, and that Xinyun might be aware that his mother gave birth to him in that location and then passed away. And the man who's been referring to himself as his father has callously cast aside his mother when she was pregnant. And that is the only thing he is aware of concerning his sad mother. It appeared as though Namgang had suddenly recalled all of the difficulties that his mother had gone through when he suddenly bent his head and furrowed his forehead. Afterward, Xinyun is questioned once more by Namgang on whether or not he invented the falsehood in response to the rumors in order to ensure his own survival. Kang, however, is adamant that what he shared is genuine, and as he mentioned earlier, there are many different accounts of the hideout leader and his mother. And as a consequence of this, Namgang furrowed his brow and sat quite still in his chair before declaring that the protagonist of Xinyun's story was none other than Gilgun Pyong, from Heavenly Favor Bank. When Xinyun told him that he was right and that he believed that Gilgun Pyong of the Heavenly Favor Bank was his biological father, he couldn't believe it and his eyes widened. The rage that he was experiencing caused him to clench his fist. Throughout the past 5 years, he had yelled and cussed at his father an innumerable number of times. In addition, Xinyun was told by Namgang that when he talks carelessly about unreal things, it makes him appear odd since he is unable to accept those stories. Xinyun continues to assert that he can provide evidence for everything, and if he was unable to do so, he never would have traveled all the way up to the mountain in the first place. Xinyun gestured in the direction of the empty box that the commander of the hideout was holding when Namgang questioned him about what he used to prove it. However, Namgang appears to be frustrated since Xinyun doesn't appear to pay heed to his comments, despite the fact that Namgang has already informed Xinyun that the package contained no items, and there is no one single use for that thing. Xinyun assured the head of the hideout that there is unquestionably nothing contained within the box, but that the injection itself serves some kind of function. In response, Namgang slams on the brakes and hurls the box at him, saying if it is the item Xinyun needs to demonstrate that his words are true. After that, Xinyun manages to get his hands on the box, at which point he inquires about the possibility of borrowing an ink stick, an ink stone, and a writing brush. Xinyun's response to Namgang's question about why he needed it is that it will explain everything after he shows him everything. Afterwards, Xinyun started to use the writing brush and gently scrub it in the box, and Namgang seemed bored waiting for him and noted that what type of nonsense is Xinyun attempting to pull. After getting to this point, he asks Xinyun whether he has any thoughts of coming clean and admitting that everything he said was a lie. But Namgang's eyes expanded to Nam's amazement when he turned his focus to the brush, and the box where letters became apparent. It was hard for him to comprehend that the box even had an etching on it. After that, Xinyun handed him the box and said that the contents were the letters that his late father had written to the head of the hideout. When it comes to the contents of the letter, he will be able to view them in greater detail if he stamps them on the paper. Xinyun also noted that it should be the same for all of the boxes that Namgang has accumulated up until this point, and that one of the contents of one of those boxes might be something that his father wanted to leave for him. Namgang was at a loss for words. He had no idea what to say. At the same time, he was intrigued by the possibility that each of the boxes he had been collecting contained a secret message from his father. Xinyun, on the other hand, collects all of the boxes, brushes each one with ink to disclose the hidden message, and then places a piece of paper on top of each one of the boxes. Namgang, who had been waiting for the result, is now quite excited to check out what is written in the paper. And when everything was said and done, Namgang was stunned when Xinyun gave him the paper and said that this father had never forgotten since he clearly remembered his wife's face and etched it on the box. When Namgang finally got a hold of the piece of paper and looked at it, he noticed a picture of his mother on it, and he couldn't help but touch it. He also stated that he spent his life having forgotten her mother at some time, and that he lives his life just with recollections of the face of her mother who had been through adversity her entire life. Namgang was overcome with emotion and unable to keep it under control. This is why tears were freely running down his face. He had just abruptly been reminded of his mother's beautiful smile. Xinyun, on the other hand, was grinning from ear to ear since his strategy had been successful in every respect, because he had already received his ultimate goal, and it was the Gale Thunder Mountain King, Do Namgang. The man himself, his objective for that commission was not the wealth of the Heavenly Favor Bank, it was him. In addition, the Blood Sect in a different future was successful in gaining control of another major hideout commander. This leader then contested the position of Supreme Head in order to obtain the Bandit Union. The Blood Sect then began plotting to eliminate the most likely contender for that position, which turned out to be the Do Namgang. In addition to this, the Blood Sect intensified the level of animosity between the hideout on Mount Tianmu and the Heavenly Favor Bank. In the end, two opposing groups engaged in a protracted conflict with one another. In spite of the fact that Namgang was ultimately successful in destroying the Heavenly Favor Bank at the end of the long conflict, he later found out that Gilgun Pyom was his biological father. Upon learning that he had murdered a member of his own family, Namgang labored under the weight of overwhelming remorse until the day he passed away. Therefore, all that could have been done was done in order to alter Namgang's future, since Xinyun needs Namgang in order to prevent the destruction of the future. In light of the fact that Xinyun disapproves everything at Namgang, the latter inquires as to whether Xinyun wants anything from him. As a response, Xinyun stood up and asked the Mountain King how he could ask for a reward for a deed that follows the will of the heavens when he had gotten to the peak of the mountain by climbing until his bones would break, and he was quite tired from having to face Senior's fist, so he would like to quench his thirst, and he requests for a cup of fine liquor. Namgang appears pleased with Xinyun's request, so he inquires once more to ascertain whether or not that is all that is required of him. When Xinyun verifies that booze is only his request, the mountain suddenly laughs out loud. As a consequence of this, all of the bandits that were outside Xinyun's residence were all bewildered because they did not know what was occurring inside. Even Rin, along with Marluk and Sima Gun, were at a loss for words and had no idea what was going on inside the residence with their clan leader. Afterwards, Namgang appeared suddenly outside of his residence and demanded that all of the bandits pay close attention to what he had to say. He gave them orders to immediately prepare for a feast and bring out all of the alcoholic beverages that were hidden in the hideout, because on that day, he was able to put his most significant regrets to rest and gain a younger brother. "We're going to get completely drunk," announced the Mountain King. Everyone was having a fantastic time and drinking booze as per the King of Gale Thunder Mountain's instructions. Marlin was engaged in a battle of strength with a bandit who was far larger than he was. When the enormous guy was defeated by Marluk, the other bandits laughed at the huge man and said things like, "It seems all that boasting about his strength proved useless, and he can't even endure using all of his remaining strength." Other bandits said that they heard that the Kunlun slaves are as powerful as wild horses, and they concluded that this must be true because Marduk was able to fight their fellow bandits. On the other hand, during the course of their chat, Sima Gun and the other bandits shared a cup of booze. He was bragging to them about what had taken place within the cave. They finally passed the second test after overcoming a revolting swarm of black death roaches, which was the final obstacle in the trial. Other bandits remarked that they couldn't believe what they had been through. Other bandits were amazed that Man Sang Jan's hidden cave was located within their mountain, and other bandits were surprised that the junior brothers were able to uncover it. But Sima Gun continued his statements and informed those bandits that it is not done yet because the long-expected trial was not yet elaborate. And it seemed as though he was the hero because he introduced himself as a genius strategist who was able to deconstruct Man Sang Jan's formation. Bandit couldn't believe that he was capable of disassembling such a formation, and due to the fact that Sima Gun's story was highly interesting, the bandits supplied wine to Sima Gun once again. Nonetheless, he had to finish his story. However, everyone was joking around and having a good time, with the exception of Rin, who was paying close attention to their clan ahead while drinking alcohol with the Mountain King. She believed that Xinyun was a man who was difficult to understand, and hence she needed to be more watchful around him. Xinyun, who was drinking wine with the Mountain King at the time, saw that Rin was staring at him carefully, and it seemed as though she was monitoring his every move. In addition, Namgang is pleased because, despite the fact that he had consumed the alcoholic beverage many times during his decades-long sojourn in the mountain hideouts, today was the first time he drank a drink that was equally as sweet and flavorful as it is today. There's no other possible explanation than the fact that he was drinking with his younger brother. Additionally, he stated that it was a reward for the hard work that Xinyun, who had put his life in danger to travel all the way there, had put in. However, Namgang became aware of something, and he disclosed to Xinyun that he was conscious of the fact that Rin and Simagun were not revealing their true faces. Xinyun had mentioned something, which is why Namgang had such a hearty chuckle and told him that his anxieties were completely unfounded. On the other hand, Xinyun requests permission to inquire about the Mountain King concerning one particular matter. Xinyun attempts to address Namgang as the leader, but Namgang stops him. Instead, the latter would prefer it if Xinyun referred to him as Heungnim, and he will not respond to any questions asked by Xinyun unless the latter addresses him as Heungnim. Xinyun responded by saying, "Understood, Heungmin," but he was hesitant to address Namgang as Heungnim due to his advanced age. The conversation continued with Xinyun asking Heungnim if he had any plans to visit the Heavenly Favor Bank. In addition, Namgang didn't answer right away, and it appears that he was considering how to respond to the question. After a brief pause, Namgang's expression darkened, and he stated that Xinyun was correct. He ought to pay a visit to the Heavenly Favor Bank on at least one occasion because there were still certain things he wanted to learn about. However, Kang was of the opinion that after Namgang learns what is written in the letters that Gilgunpyeong has left behind, the visit that Namgang pays will have an extremely significant meaning. The Murim world is heading toward a more loud future sooner or later. When Heungnim told Kang that he wanted to ask him a presumptuous question, Kang's train of thought came to an abrupt halt. Heungnim wanted to know if it was truly alright for Kang that his commission would be registered as unsuccessful. However, Xinyun has previously communicated to Namgang on several occasions that it is acceptable to cause his commission to fail, and that he has no problem with this at all. In addition, Namgang was at a loss for words. He believed that, should the news of his failure become widely known, Xinyun would be mocked for allowing his avarice to cause him to behave in an irresponsible manner. But if it were to become public knowledge that he, Namgang, one of the major hideout commanders of the Bandit Union, had his hideout perfectly infiltrated, not only would it have a negative effect on him personally, but it would also have a significant influence on the bandit unions as a whole. But Xinyun wasn't concerned about his honor, rather, he was being respectful of the challenging situation he was in. And for the younger brother, Xinyun's thoughtfulness for him, he unexpectedly told Xinyun that he desires to convey his profound gratitude and admiration for Xinyun. On the other hand, when Namgang wished to show respect for Kang, Kang's eyes widened in surprise, and he stifled Namgang's offer of gratitude because the former had already demonstrated a sufficient amount of appreciation, and he was acting in a manner that was appropriate. But Namgang continued to insist on it since Xinyun was hiding his shame, and Namgang only wanted to reciprocate the favor as his older brother. As Namgang's anger grew, he abruptly stamped his foot, releasing a tremendous amount of energy. As a result of the energy, the table that was in front of them seems to vanish, and all of the bandits, including Rin, Simagun, and Marluk, are taken aback when the Mountain King all of a sudden releases such a significant amount of force. They were all taken aback and didn't know what to do because, only a short while ago, they had been laughing and having a nice time together. Namgang drew the attention of all of his bandit brothers and announced that his younger brother had turned down enormous wealth, and instead chose to take the humiliation upon himself in order to protect their honor. If they do not return the favor in its entirety, it would be evidence that they are nothing more than common criminals. Therefore, he seizes the chance to announce to his younger brother and to all of his bandits' brothers that beginning from that day forward, his younger brother's commission clan will be permitted to go through all of the mountains that are under his jurisdiction without being subject to any restrictions. Kang was taken aback when he learned about Namgang, since a reward like that was something he never would have considered for himself. "Yes, sir," simultaneously replied by bandits. Kang was under the impression that Namgang was a formidable mountain stronghold leader who dominated mountain strongholds in the provinces of Zhejiang, Jiangxi, and Anhui. This indicates that they will not perform any inspections on the Beacon clan, which will result in significant gains for the Heavenly Favor Bank. He broke into a smile all of a sudden because he realized that their issue would be resolved immediately because the most significant barrier to their commission was clashes with bandits. As a result of Namgang's announcement, the Beacon Clan Commission now has the opportunity to extend its sphere of influence to areas further afield than Zhejiang. On the other hand, Namgang turned to Xinyun and said that it was the least he could do for his younger brother, so he pleaded with him to accept for the sake of his older brother who was missing. In addition to this, Kang made a fist and proclaimed that his announcement is the best gift there is. He shows homage to the mountain monarch, who receives it with a smile on his face. Suddenly, Namgang chuckles, and you can tell that he is actually delighted. He then raises his bottle of booze and asks everyone to raise their cup and make a toast to his younger brother, who shares his happiness on that day. To everyone's long and healthy lives, exclaimed Namgang. Then he abruptly drank his bottle of liquor. Everyone cheers at each other and continues to drink until they are completely drunk. In the privacy of his own room, Xinyun was giving the situation a great deal of thought. Outside, the Beacon clan was suffering a string of setbacks as a result of the increasing volume of malicious tales that circulated about them. According to one of the reports, the clan leader took a sizable amount of money, which explains why their fund is running out of money much more quickly than was anticipated. Additionally, the Hwang Rock clan has been spreading malicious rumors to their new guards, which explains why the number of guards quitting as a result of being received by their schemes has been increasing. Xinyun paces back and forth while he mulls over whether or not he should deal with such issues at this time. However, his primary concern is for the safe return of their clan leader, who has gone to Mount Tianmu. He removed the sheath from his sword as he waited anxiously for the leader of their clan to arrive unharmed. He needed to pull himself together since in situations such as those, he was expected to act as a kind of backbone for the clan leader. Because the clan head spared his life at a time when he could have passed away at any second, he will do everything in his power to assist him, even if it takes his own life. But he was taken aback since someone was shouting outside, so he hastily exited the dwelling. And when he did, he noticed that their guards had been injured. He was shocked. Afterwards, when Xinyun spotted Akchil and Director Yang waiting in their gate, he furrowed his brow in confusion. One of the guards was attempting to explain who Akchil was, but he was paralyzed by the terror that he was experiencing, and was unable to finish his sentence. Nodi and his son Gunho hurried over to confront Akchil with their question of who he was and demand that he disclose his name. But Akchil disregarded him in favor of looking for the demonic head Xinyun to come out and kneel before him. If Xinyun did this, Akchil promised that he would spare the demon's life and then take his own. When Nodi and Xinyun heard Akchil refer to their clan lord as a demonic head, both of them furrowed their brows and clenched their jaws. Xinyun was quivering in fury and tightly gripping his sword because he had the audacity to refer to the lord of their clan as a demonic head. Xinyun abruptly lifted his blade and released a great force against Akchil. What an imprudence, Xinyun added. Nodi gave the order for the guards to brandish their swords. Xinyun, however, was perplexed since it appeared that there were only two of them, but Xinyun knew that Akchil would never go there without his subordinates. However, Xinyun's eyes brightened and he froze in his tracks when he recognized someone. Xinyun, Nodi, and Gunno all drop their jaws and turn their sight to the man who enters the gate. The man is asking them who has the audacity to point a blade at this subordinate. A sudden curse was placed on Xinyun because the individuals responsible are the leaders of the Mount Huang sect. He was known as Master Chung Su, and he was a lunar chilling sword and an elder of the Mount Huang sect. He immediately requests that Xinyun remove his swords from the situation. But Xinyun became serious because he believed that what had occurred was a catastrophe since the master of the Mount Huang sect would respond so swiftly. So he questioned Chung Su how they might lessen their vigilance toward the invaders who had damaged their carefully locked gate and infiltrated their area. Chung Su didn't have an answer for him. But Xinyun, along with Nodi and Gunnon, was curious when another young man spoke about Xinyun being arrogant of Jinu's tongue to run like that and that he must not know who is standing before him. The young man's name was Song Hak, and he was Akchil's disciple and brother. After suddenly yelling at them, he demanded to know whether they were under the impression that he would forgive them for amputating the arm of his younger brother. On the other hand, Xinyun was under the impression that even Song Hak, a direct pupil of Master Chung Su and the first-generation Song clan disciple with the most impressive set of abilities, was present. It is intolerable that an elder of the Mount Huang sect would take action for the purpose of exacting revenge on a simple branch disciple. After all, there is no value for an elder who aspires to be the future leader of the sect to get involved in affairs that are of such little importance. Chung Su must have been promised an amazing wealth by the Hwang Rock clan in exchange for ridding their whole clan. However, Chung Su explained that since the limbs of his disciples were severed by a terrifying demonic head, it was impossible for him not to go there himself to get revenge. Chung Su's remarks went too far when she referred to their clan lord as a demonic head, and this made Xinyun angry. Suddenly, he yelled at Chung Su and demanded to know what evidence he had to support such ludicrous assertions. But Chung Su smiled and suddenly pointed his sword and attacked him. Jinwoo was startled, and his eyes widened when he realized that the sharp blade of Chung Su was only an inch away from his eyes. As a result, Jinwoo manages to block his attack before it hits. On the other hand, Nodi and his son were both taken aback by the unexpected turn of events concerning the leader of Mount Huang. However, in preparation for the impending assault, Jinwoo clutched his blade ever more tenaciously. Nodi, together with his son and their guards, was going to assist the vice leader when Song Hak stopped them and warned them not to interfere with Chung Su and Jinwoo because if they make even the slightest move, they will massacre all of them without pity. Then Gung Ho asks his father if he is interested in going into battle with him, but Jinwoo yells at them to back away from the fight, because if they come forward, everyone else will be slaughtered, and he was in good shape as the only adversary left standing. Nodi is forced to come to a halt because he has no other option. He grits his teeth because there is nothing he can do to assist Jinwoo given that he has already instructed them to remain where they are. On the other hand, Chung Su slashed his sword in the direction of Jinwoo's neck, but Jinwoo was able to avoid the assault by bending backward. Chung Su was infuriated by Jinwoo's folly because all that was required of him was to obediently deliver Xin Wun there. However, he dared contradict an elder of the powerful Mount Huang sect, despite the fact that Jinwoo was nothing more than a soldier of the small Beacon Commission clan. He also stated that Jinwoo's arrogance is without limits, and that the Union's mission to battle this and exterminate the demons has not yet come to a successful conclusion. In addition, Chung Su never stopped striking Jinwoo, unleashing enormous amounts of force with each blow. However, Jinwoo was able to defend herself and counter Chung Su's assaults. After that, Chung Su unleashed a powerful blow and slashed his sword towards Jinwoo, but Jinwoo leaped unexpectedly, causing Chung Su's blade to hit the ground. Furthermore, Chung Su warns Jinwoo that he must bring Xin Wun to that same moment if he does not want to hasten toward an untimely end. However, Jinwoo reasoned that their clan leader was extremely busy with work and would not have time to receive him. Therefore, they should not continue on and should return to their sect. Jinwoo was having trouble breathing, but he was adamant about beating the leader of the Mount Huang sect despite his condition. As a consequence of this, Chung Su formed a grin on his face and declared that beatings are a wonderful form of treatment for individuals who behave irresponsibly and are unaware of their proper position. Then he let forth a tremendous amount of energy and employed his technique of the spiraling lunar sword, then directed toward Jinwoo and hit. And as a consequence of this, Jinwoo was unable to avoid the blow, and the huge amount of energy that impacted his body caused his blood to spray in all directions and eventually pool on the ground. Afterwards, Jinwoo was shivering in fear and coughing when he saw the leader of the Mount Huang sect walking close to him. The leader of the Mount Huang sect told Jinwoo that if he wanted to preserve his life, he could better call his clan leader than plunge his blade in Jinwoo's neck. However, the latter still did not follow Chung Su because Xin Wun was not physically present and had gone to Mount Tianmu instead. Because Jinwoo understood that this moment was the beginning of the end for him, he scowled and gritted his teeth as he ordered Chung Su to execute him. On the other hand, when Jinwoo didn't follow through to deliver their clan master, Chung Su had no alternative but to kill him because he had no other options. He lifted his blade to do so. However, just as Chung Su was about to bring his blade down on Jinwoo's neck, the latter appeared to be perplexed. Because of this, he opened his eyes and was taken aback when he saw Xin Wun in front of him holding his sword back against Chung Su's blade. The latter was caught off guard when Xin Wun suddenly materialized in front of him and ordered him to cease his actions. Chung Su furrowed his brow and looked perplexed as Xin Wun suddenly materialized in front of him. It seemed as though Xin Wun had entered the sphere of Chung Su's Kai senses without his prior awareness. He stared at Xin Wun closely and thought to himself that he had accomplished an inconceivable feat using only standard martial arts. Therefore, he moved backwards. When Nodi, his son, and a large number of the clan's guards saw their clan leader arriving, they could not contain their excitement. On the other hand, after placing his sword over his neck, Xin Wun flashed a grin at Chung Su. He made the observation that it appeared that while he was away, they had some uninvited guests. By uninvited guests, he meant the leader of the Mount Huang sect and his minions. He then turns to Jinwoo and asks him whether he is okay, but Jinwoo appears to be in pain because he suddenly grabs his chest. Because of this, Xin Wun encourages him to treat his body with the respect it deserves. He ordered Jinwoo to remain in place, and then he put his palm on Jinwoo's shoulder because he was going to fast heal him. Xin Wun then used his white wishes to heal Jinwoo. On the other hand, the status window appeared and stated that the white wishes strengthens Xinyun's self-curative properties or those of a target to quickly heal injuries. The effect increases as skill proficiency and level increases, and that should be enough for emergency aid. Xinyun told Jinwoo that his condition should improve now, so he better be at ease, because starting that moment, he will make Chung-Soo cripple, then he will turn to look at the latter. Furthermore, Chung-Soo became infuriated after hearing what Xinyun had to say. As a result, he furrowed his forehead and became angry. On the other hand, Song-hak heard Xinyun as well. He was incensed that Xinyun had spoken to his master in such a manner, and he threatened to amputate all of Xinyun's limbs. While Ak-chil seemed to be overjoyed upon finally coming face to face with Xinyun, the individual who was responsible for cutting off his arm. Because his opponent, Chung-Soo, was also his master, he reasoned that he would be digging his own grave if he lost. Xinyun is a guy who, despite appearances to the contrary, has a narrow-minded mindset. This is due to the fact that he knows that making fun of someone with the status of Master Chung-Soo will result in death. On the other hand, Song-hak was ready to approach Xinyun, but he was taken aback when Chung-Soo suppressed him and asked him to step aside. Chung-Soo then continued by saying that Xinyun's wickedness genuinely reaches the skies, and that is why he will eliminate Xinyun without having to bring him before the Union. After that, he unleashes a tremendous amount of force and suddenly charges straight towards Xinyun like a wind.